It's great to be joined today by Maurice Carney, who is the co-founder and executive director of Friends of the Congo, an advocacy institution raising consciousness about the situation in the Congo, also providing support to local institutions, particularly youth. Maurice, it's so great to speak to you. You know, we are at the 20th anniversary of soldiers entering Congo. This is a conflict that maybe is not particularly familiar to many in our audience. So let's start with 1996. What happened in 96, and talk to us about the wholesale devastation that we've seen since then.
Sure. In 1996, the Rwandan and Ugandan government, along with Angola, Burundi, invaded the Congo. And we use the term invasion because they were not invited in. They went into the Congo ostensibly in pursuit of the perpetrators of the genocide in Rwanda, who had crossed into Congo's borders. And unfortunately, however, they went further than that. They did not just pursue these perpetrators. However, they also overthrew the government at the time under Joseph Desiree Mobutu. The country was called Zaire then, and installed the leader of the rebel movement that they had used, the Rwanda and Uganda used as a proxy. His name was Laurent Desire Kabila, and he was ultimately installed in May of 1997. The Rwandan and Ugandan faction fell out with Mr. Kabila in 1998, and they invaded the Congo a second time in 1998. Those two invasions combined triggered what the United Nations says is the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, where an estimated 6 million people lost their lives between 1996 and 2007. 2007 is the last date for any mortality study in the country that was due to the conflict. So you have a situation where not only did Rwanda and Uganda in particular invade the DRC, they also supported militia groups inside the country, even after the official end of the war. The war ended in 2002. However, as a result of the instability in the east of the country, the conflict is ongoing. And the current president, Joseph Kabila, he's the product of this 20-year conflict, because he came in to office as a result of being a part of that invading force, that rebel group that had moved across the country. His father, Laurent Kabila, who was initially installed, was assassinated in 2001, and Joseph took over from his father, presided over a transition process that lasted until 2006, when elections were held and Joseph Kabila was elected president. And according to the Constitution, which was ratified in 2006, president can hold can serve for two 5-year terms. So President Kabila served from 2006 to 2011, and then he won elections again in 2011, even though those elections were riddled with fraud, and he basically stole the 2011 election. So Congolese people were like, okay, fine, you in power for two terms. Your second term expires in 2016. However, now that we're in 2016, Joseph Kabila does not want to leave power. He's supposed to leave office on December 19th of this year, and is supposed to be replaced by an incoming president. However, his administration has basically refused really to organize elections so that he wouldn't have a replacement. And due to the fact that Mr. Kabila has control over the courts, he got a constitutional court to rule, incredibly, that Mr. Kabila doesn't have to leave office until he's replaced by incoming president. So if you don't organize elections, you can't be replaced by an incoming president. So
Yeah.
Conceivably, he could rule forever. So you see how preposterous that is, right?
Yeah, and I'm curious, Maurice. You know, you've outlined. You started with telling us about, you know, the millions of fatalities that have resulted from the conflict. You've talked to us about at least some of the points that have contributed to not having a peaceful transition of power since independence was won in 1960. What's your sense of why this conflict is not as present in the minds of many in the West as other conflicts? And this is something I find fascinating but also disturbing, which is the way in
Yeah.
which certain conflicts are regular Western news and on the forefront of many minds in America and in Western Europe, etc. And other conflicts, and clearly this is a conflict where the numbers and the data tell us this is outrageous, does not make news in the same way. What's your sense of it?
It's not any one reason. It's a complex of interlocking reasons, right? I'd say one, the interests that are at stake. For example, U.S. has been involved in the Congo since day one, since its independence, right? The Congo is the first post-independence country that the United States uh, intervened in, post-independent African country. And it was the United States that, under the CIA, that overthrew Congo's first democratically elected prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, which the chief of station of the CIA at that time, Larry Devlin, outlines in a book with the same title, Congo Chief of Station. Then the U.S. installed Joseph Mobutu as a dictator for over 3 decades. So the U.S. has been on the wrong side of the issue in the Congo. Even the invasions in 96 and 98, the U.S. provided backing for Rwanda and Uganda in those invasions. So U.S. interests has played a destructive role in the Congo. So it's not like Darfur, for example, where you can point the finger to the Chinese who are involved economically and to the Muslims or to the Islamic religion. So those were the boogeyman. But in this case, in terms of a negative role, it's U.S. government, U.S. corporations that have played a negative role. So that would tamp down on the coverage. That's what we reason that would, the CNN and CBS wouldn't be so quick to say, well, here it is that you have the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. And by the way, those countries that invaded the Congo, the United States armed them, financed them, trained them, provided them with intelligence. Oh, and also when international bodies like the United Nations try to hold these perpetrators accountable, the U.S. has run diplomatic and political interference.
And
So
there's
that's not
actually, Maurice,
new.
isn't there also another layer of U.S. involvement, which is that President Joseph Kabila himself hired a D.C. lobbying firm called the BGI Group for just under $1 million. That lobbying group was founded by former Republican governor of Mississippi, Haley Barbour. And I mean, we're talking about lobbying interests involved in the Congo as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a later occurrence, but that's a classic example of where you have an African government that are committing crimes locally because the Kabila regime is firing up on nonviolent pro-democracy demonstrators and killing them. And from January 2015, they killed at least 4 dozen or around 4 dozen protesters.
Hmm.
Just this year, September 19th and 20th, according to the United Nations, they killed over 50. So these crimes that are being committed locally, they're being cleansed on the international level. And the lobbying firms such as BGR Group is one of those institutions that have been tasked by the Congolese government, hired by the Congolese government to clean up its image in the international community. So that does play a role. So that's one reason. Negative U.S. Engagement. The second reason for lack of attention is we're talking about Africa, especially the Congo. Joseph Conrad's classic work, Heart of Darkness. That's still in the mind and the psyche of people
Hmm.
that we're talking about this dark continent. So that's what happens there. People die there. So it doesn't rise up on the meter, and those lives are less valued. So it doesn't call for as much attention, as much focus, as much investigation, as much inquiry. So that's the second reason. The third is the nature of the conflict. It's not a conflict. It's a slow-moving conflict, right? Where the overwhelming majority of people have lost their lives as a result of displacement, being driven into the forest, villages being destabilized, people dying from pneumonia and exposure. So that also makes a difference in terms of it's not dramatic, bombs dropping,
Yeah.
people being fired upon consistently. So that adds to the complexity of the conflict. So those are some of the reasons I believe that it doesn't get as much attention. And again, I really want to reinforce this point. It's when conflicts happen on the African continent, for the most part, they're usually attributed to ethnic or tribal conflict. Not there's the political and geopolitical elements of those conflicts are drained out, and people look at the situation as if it's with resignation. That's always happened in Africa, and that's going to continue to happen in Africa. So we're introducing a new way of looking at of the continent and showing all the players that are involved, the Europeans, the Asians, the Canadians, the Americans. The United Nations published several studies in 2000, from 2001 to 2003, where they documented some 85 corporations was involved in the Congo and contributed to perpetuating the conflict. So it's everybody really wants a piece of the Congo. Foreign governments, multilateral institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, corporations. You have Phelps Dodge, or what is now Freeport McMoran here in Arizona, that's involved in copper and cobalt. You have the OM Group, that's out of Cleveland or near Ohio, that's involved in mining of copper and cobalt. There's just a whole range of corporations that have been involved in the Congo.
No doubt. And that gets to the conversation about conflict minerals that end up in the mobile phones and other electronics here in the United States, but a conversation for a different day. We've been speaking with Maurice Carney, co-founder and executive director of Friends of the Congo. Thanks so much for joining me and talking about this.
Thank you.